Pokemon series has been a cornerstone of gaming for decades now, captivating players with its unique blend of exploration, monster collection, and battling. However, let's face it, the new games have issues. Yes, that's right. So in today's video, we're talking about Pokemon, one of my favorite games of all time. That's my original Pikachu edition. You can even see my signature there because I used to take this to school. So I'm very passionate about Pokemon, but again, not every Pokemon game is great. So before we talk about how to make the series better, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're not already. And comment down below, let me know your thoughts on the Pokemon series as it is now and what suggestions you might have to improve these games. So let's get to the list. I think there might be some points here that you might agree with. So let's start with the first point today, possibly the most glaring issue, especially now with the newer games, and that is improving graphics and performance of these games. Now, while yes, Pokemon games are known for their charming art style, look, they often lag behind modern standards in graphical fidelity and performance, and it's become really evident with the last few games, especially Scarlet and Violet. It seemed like it was not even complete. Not only were there bad frame drops and pop-ins, it just didn't seem like a well put together game graphically. And you can't blame the hardware because look at a game like Xenoblade Chronicles 3, for example, done by Monolith Soft. These games are huge. You have expansive worlds that you can run from end to end, and there's little to no pop-in and a very smooth frame rate. So you can't blame it on the hardware because other games look really great. So my hope is that with the Switch 2 release here this year, we're going to get enhanced optimization, more polished animations, and higher resolution textures that will hopefully elevate the visual experience, which is going to allow the game to have its world and the creatures brought to life in a better way. Because let's be honest, you don't want to pay for a brand new Pokemon game and have hiccups, frame rate drops, all these other graphical anomalies. It's really just poor form on the sake of Game Freak for how much money they're making versus the amount of budget they have for these games. It just seems like a bit of a wash. More recent titles like Pokemon Legends Arceus and Scarlet and Violet have this open world element to them, and there's room for refinement. I think what we really need to look at is how did the older games feel connected? The games just were accessible. You could walk from Pallet Town to the Elite Four, more or less, in terms of Pokemon Blue, Yellow, whatever. And that was great because you could access everything. And on small scale, yes, everything is interconnected. But as these games got bigger, I felt like they were just, I don't know, just something felt wrong about them. But like I mentioned with Arceus and Scarlet and Violet, things started to get a little bit more immersive, but to truly immerse players, the world has got to feel alive and interconnected, like those older games. Dynamic ecosystems where Pokemon interact with each other and their environment can make each area more distinct and memorable. The interactions with the Pokemon you see there would not only make the world feel more vibrant, but also offer gameplay opportunities for capturing or studying Pokemon in their natural habitats. So kind of how Arceus and Scarlet and Violet had these compartmentalized areas, I feel like if we just had one giant map, almost like a 1,000 times version of the original Pokemon games, in terms of size, I think that would really be the best way forward for having a open world design. And with that environment being a little bit more robust and interconnected, it would allow the narrative to flow more organically, allowing you to uncover stories and mysteries at your own pace. And environmental storytelling and regional myths and subtle hints from NPCs could guide you to hidden areas or rare Pokemons without relying on rigid objectives to do this or do that. The hope is that this approach would foster a sense of wonder and discovery, encouraging exploration and rewarding curiosity. Almost kind of like Breath of the Wild meets Pokemon in terms of what areas you can go to and NPCs that you can interact with along the way. That's probably actually the best way to describe what I'm after here. One other issue that I've had with Pokemon games in recent times is the story. The stories are pretty much non-existent, or if they're there, they're kind of boring. Scarlet and Violet had the right idea with some of the time travel stuff, which I thought was pretty cool, and some of the elements of Arceus were okay, but it's been a long time since I've been truly gripped by a Pokemon story. And one way to make Pokemon games more engaging is by focusing on the more deeper narratives and character arcs. Imagine a storyline that delves into themes of growth, conflict, and the relationship between humans and Pokemon. Morally complex situations could challenge players to make impactful choices, adding layers of meaning to the journey, not just being pretty much a hallway simulator in terms of story. Rivals and allies could undergo meaningful development alongside the player. For example, like a cocky rival might learn humility through their defeats, while a timid friend can gain confidence as they grow stronger. These arcs would make the characters feel a little bit more relatable and memorable and create genuine emotional connections to these characters. Now, when I say that, these themes are kind of present in some of the more recent Pokemon games, but they're really just surface level. There's really nothing there to them. And again, I think as with every other Pokemon game, really driving home the fact that there is a bond between the trainers and the Pokemon. This needs to take center stage. We need to have a Pokemon that's been with you, the player, through thick and thin, and that might show behaviors or take initiative in critical moments. So making your starter Pokemon more of a main character than just a piece of your party, I think that would be really interesting. Instead of just heavily relying on the legendary Pokemon to have more of the character development in terms of, a Pokemon that actually drives the narrative forward. So if we were not only to have that open world thing that I mentioned earlier, but integrate more lore into that as well as the main narrative, whether it's through quests or encounters or discoveries, the world could feel a lot more alive and full. And because of that, the story feels a lot more believable if that can happen. Now, hang on, before we get any further in the list, did you guys know that almost 90% of the people that watch my channel on the regular aren't subscribed? So if you're enjoying this kind of content as well as weekly JRPG content, I'd love to have you here each week. So don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you want to support this channel directly, you can do so by joining with channel memberships. You get exclusive access to some really cool badges and emotes and some other rewards. So please check the link down below or hit the join button below this video. I would love your support. Anyway, let's get back to the video with yet another great talking point, I think, on how to improve this series. When the Pokemon Diamond and Pearl remakes came out, I got really burned out on the Pokemon formula because since 1998, I've been playing these games and it's just pretty much been a non-existent challenge. I've really been tired of having to press A to win, pretty much. And I'm a guy who doesn't really play these games for breeding or trading or anything else. I just play for the main story or lack thereof in some cases and just seeing what cool Pokemon are there. But at the core of these games is the battle strategies, the battling, and I've really gotten burned out on the last few games because the battles just seem, I don't know, not really interesting. And the one thing I will say is everybody says this about more recent Pokemon releases is that some aspects of these games are steps in the right direction, and that is true. But when are we going to arrive at that destination? For Arceus and Scarlet and Violet, environmental effects such as weather and terrain had a significant role in shaping the battlefield. Whether it's snowy fields or anything else, it really adds a layer of strategic design and decision making for your battles. That's really cool. That's great. But I would like to see more elemental stuff implemented into it. Customization could also extend to moves and abilities, allowing your Pokemon to adapt based on conditions like the nature of the Pokemon or items that they're holding at any given time. One other interesting idea is that a stamina system might limit the frequency of high power moves. And yes, I know we also have that with the PP or the move points or whatever it's called. I think if we had a stamina based system, this would encourage players to balance offense and defense. And because if you're anything like me, you always have that one high level Pokemon that blazes through the entire game, and especially in a world before EXP share, everybody would be in the low 20s or teens because you pretty much have a level 90 Charizard and using Fire Blast to get through the Elite Four. So that was cool back in the 90s, but now it's just one of those things that is absolutely mind-numbing to me. So I'd be interested to hear if you guys have any ways that you feel you can improve the battle system. And speaking of older Pokemon games, maybe about 13 years ago or more, I managed to record footage from my Pokemon Yellow cartridge, capturing my original team before, of course, the inevitable battery dies and you lose all your save stuff. So this is really special that I was able to preserve this, but I am very passionate about the older games. And yeah, there's just something very special about them that I would like to see maybe brought back from the late 90s to now. Maybe it's aesthetic with like an HD 2D aesthetic that would be really cool, or just an overall vibe. I think the newer games are really just kind of missing that. At the beginning of the video, I mentioned appealing to players of all ages, and I realized that a lot of my gripes with Pokemon and a lot of my critiques for the Pokemon series honestly may never come to fruition because at the heart of it, this game is pretty much for kids, and that's totally okay. And I realize as I've gotten older, I may not be the target market for Pokemon anymore, and it might be a little bit baseless for me to complain about Pokemon games because I'm so far detached from what they're age range is for players, and that's okay. But I think one way to get around that is to add customizable difficulty levels. Catering to a broader audience, Pokemon games could include adjustable difficulty settings. Maybe a hard mode with advanced AI and competitive level strategies would really challenge veteran players, while an easier mode could help newcomers or kids ease into the experience. Options like this would make the games more accessible and enjoyable for everyone of any age, really. And I think having that hard mode or like a veteran mode would be really great incentive to bring back the older players that have pretty much been tired of having a press A to win kind of deal, because like I said before, I'm just really sick of that. So having a hard mode baked into the game that would challenge me straight away, I think would actually be a really welcome change. One complaint I've seen with the Pokemon series, especially since Sword and Shield, is endgame content. One thing I was really disappointed with when I played Sword and Shield was I was waiting for the moment where I finally recruited the legendary wolf dogs or whatever they are, and you finally get them like 20 seconds before the credits roll. And after that point, I have no interest in playing the game anyway. I've done everything. I've done the Elite Four. I've done the story. I've got the legendary dogs. Now what? I think especially with the more recent games, having the DLC there is interesting. But for me, it's out of sight, out of mind. There's too much of a gap between the release of the game and then these DLC packs. I honestly don't know how popular they are or how well they go over, but I think if we're able to have some more endgame content that's able to keep us really engaged, maybe even just pull like a Dragon Quest 11, you know what I mean? So you beat the main story and actually, nope, you haven't beat the full game yet. Here's another 10, 20 or something hours worth of content. And I think this could actually roll into my next point here, which is integrating multiple regions. Back in the gold and silver days, it blew my mind that we could go back to the original Kanto region and more or less explore and challenge the original gym leaders. Like, that was amazing. I don't think anybody saw that coming. Having some sort of interconnectedness with whatever world we decide to play in, or the Game Freak decides to have us play in for a new game, maybe have us go and revisit some of the other regions or just a region in particular and just have a more massive interconnected adventure. That would be really great endgame content. And exploring past regions with updated mechanics and new stories would really provide a nostalgic but fresh experience, uniting the Pokemon world like never before, or at least, again, since Gold and Silver. I have just a couple of smaller talking points for what I would like to see in the next few Pokemon games. So instead of making their own unique sections, I'm just going to kind of rapid fire here and explain my thoughts on them. And first up is going to be incorporating player choice into the story. Now, could you imagine allowing some of your decisions having the ability to influence the story with either dialogue options or branching paths? And this could create more immersive and replayable experiences. While the core story may stay the same, having the option to be able to change the narrative or have different alliances to different outcomes, I mean, that would make the journey feel uniquely personal. And instead of buying two different versions of the same game, more or less, why not have everything rolled into one game? And depending on your choices, you can see the outcome of like Silver versus Gold or Ruby versus Sapphire. I think that would be really cool. And that would actually make me want to replay the game again to get other options or have a new game plus and get those other options were missable Pokemon. Now, piggybacking off of some story stuff, I think these Pokemon games need voice acting. Adding voice acting could really bring these characters to life, making cutscenes more engaging or emotional, or just having great cutscenes in general. Hearing some of the passion, the humor, or the determination in these characters' voices would actually allow me to feel emotional connection to the people in the world here in the Pokemon games. And this is really a great way to enhance immersion in these stories. So if we get a great story, why not throw some voice actors on these games? It's not like Game Freak can't afford it or Nintendo can't afford it. I honestly just think they're pretty lazy in getting these games out as quickly as possible. So if they took the time to have some dialogue choices or branching paths with some voice acting and just a great story in general, I think we would be in for a treat. Some of the online features could also be fixed. I mean, streamlined online connectivity in Pokemon games. I mean, how great would that be? And honestly, that comes down to Nintendo's friend code system. It's just very clunky, and it's been clunky since, a long time ago. Features like easy to use trading or matchmaking for battles or cooperative raid systems with minimal friction in actually getting these things going would make it a lot easier for you and me to connect and collaborate. These improvements, I think, would foster a stronger sense of of community within the Pokemon world, instead of having, again, that friction when you want to go do something. Because it's not just to, set it up and go. It's like a multi-step process, and that kind of almost kills the fun for me. And lastly, I think we could really benefit from some more diverse Pokemon designs, or maybe even more simplified designs. I mean, there's some weird Pokemon designs out there, let's be honest. Are we also at the point where we've kind of run out of ideas as well? I honestly don't know. But maybe fresh and imaginative Pokemon designs grounded in the world's ecology and lore could reinvigorate the series. Striking a balance between simplicity and creativity could ensure that new designs feel unique without being overly gimmicky. I mean, we're going to have some gimmicky designs. It's going to happen, but I think there's a reason why the initial 151 and maybe a little bit into the second gen are the most iconic and the most unique. It's not necessarily because, they were impactful on the time. I mean, of course they were, but I think there's just something simplistic about those original designs that just really hold up now. Almost scary to say this, 30 years later. And they're just great designs, great Pokemon, and if we could somehow get back to the roots with some more basic stuff, I think I would be down for that. So that's my list, and I'm sticking to it. So yes, I may be a Pokemon traditionalist with my love for the original series. I mean, of course, I've got my Analog Pocket here loaded up with the yellow version from my childhood, which is very special to me. But I'm very passionate about these games because I have such a deep love and nostalgia for the series. So I'm just hoping for it to go in a way that we all really love and appreciate the series without having to trash it every time these games come out. I'm sure you know what I mean. So anyway, thank you so much for watching today. I hope you guys enjoy the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe and comment your thoughts down below on how to improve this series. Bye-bye. We'll see you next week.